What the heck is up, everybody? Welcome back to another Eddie Liger Power Hour, coming to you again from my iPad. I'm sorry, I thought I would have a computer by this time. It just didn't happen. Wasn't able to make it where I need to make it in order to get that computer. But this should be the last stream that I do from the iPad here. And either way, we still have most of the features. You guys just have to watch me reach and touch the screen every time I want to interact with one of your comments. But looks like we got a super chat already. Holy cow, starting off the stream right. Have you heard of the book, The Black Book of the New Left by Augustine LaHaye? Lage? I have not, but sounds like an interesting book. Sounds like the Black Book of the New Left. Is that about how the New Left was created by the CIA and whatnot? Sounds very interesting. I'll have to check that out. But thank you, Battle Cossack, for the 50 Argentinian dollars. That translates to millions and millions of US dollars. So I'm rich now. I'm going to be able to buy a new computer. The party will have funding for years. So thank you very much. What's up, Nate? Good to see Nate in the chat, ACP member. We'll get you there, you bet. Thank you, Molly. With your guys' help, we'll get there. But actually, eventually, I will need to buy a new computer. But a great comrade of the American Communist Party has offered to give me their backup computer that they weren't using. So I'll at least have something, and it's pretty nice. So I will at least have something until we can save up enough money to buy a nice one or whatever. But oh boy, you don't know what you're into. Yeah, I'm excited to read that. I'm excited to check that out. But today we're going to be talking about the DPRK. Was doing some research on the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, today for a TikTok, and I think their economic rebound after COVID is really interesting and worth talking about. So obviously we're going to debunk some of the myths about the DPRK, which is one of my favorite things to do. I've got a whole playlist here on YouTube that's actually fairly popular, just debunking DPRK myths. It's a huge trend on TikTok, which is interesting, that so many people are interested in the DPRK and debunking the myths. I've got a bit of a cut on my lip today, a fat lip, small black eye from battling it out with one of my athletes who I'm training, who's ranked third in the country right now. So feeling good about him, and another one of my high school athletes going into the state and national tournament. If it seems like I haven't been around as much, that's where I've been, getting them trained up, getting them ready. I also had a friend and teammate pass away recently, which was tragic. And I've been dealing with that emotionally and, going to the funeral and all that stuff. But yeah, I had one of my girl wrestlers won the girls' state tournament, which was amazing. That's the first state champion I've ever coached. Very difficult thing to do, winning state. And then I have a high school boy, a couple high school boys who are coach, but one who I've been working very closely with, who are going into the boys' state tournament now. And then after that, we'll have the college guys I work with going into the national tournament. So all very exciting stuff for me. Very busy time of the year. Time of the year where I'm going to be coming in with cuts and bruises because I'm scrapping it out with these guys, making sure they're ready. So more for the Computer Mutual Fund. Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much for the $20. That's huge. And Molly is a member, which means she has access to some emotes, some like custom Midwestern Marx emojis, and also has access to Carlos's book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which you can get access to if you become a member. So appreciate all of our YouTube members and all of our Patreon supporters on patreon.com/Midwestern Marx. Obviously, we're a completely people's funded institute. We're not getting money from corporations or USAID like certain entities might have been, possibly the Intercept, which breaks my heart. I mean, what do you expect from the Intercept at this point? I don't know if people saw that, but there were people tying USAID funding to the Intercept and found out that their journalists are making upwards of like $200,000 and $300,000 a year, which is very hard to do if you're a people's funded outlet or organization. And I haven't expected much from the Intercept since Glenn Greenwald left, but they used to be one of my favorite sources. I would say them and the Gray Zone really helped me get through college. I studied politics, and had to do this these assignments. I'm rambling here. This is a really long intro. I'll play the intro in a bit, but we had to do these assignments where you would take a certain event that happened in the world, a certain news story, and you would give a presentation on how the mainstream Western media covered it as compared to independent sources. And that was one of the things that was big for me and waking me up about what was really going on around the world and how thoroughly we are lied to by the media. It made me realize, that's what really made me realize the media isn't just accidentally making mistakes, right? They didn't just trip and fall and whoops, accidentally lied America into the Iraq War. No, they're doing this stuff deliberately. This is the way that the system is designed. Read Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality if you want a more in-depth analysis of how it works. But even that book was written in the 90s. It needs to be updated for today with social media and whatnot. Yeah, why was I talking about that? Oh, yeah, because of that, The Intercept and the Gray Zone were like my go-to sources. And that's why I love the Gray Zone guys a lot. They've never let me down. You know, even when we launched ACP, they were supportive of us and boosting our stuff and whatnot when a lot of people were afraid to work with us and support us. And then The Intercept used to be another one of my go-to sources, but not anymore. Now they're on the Democratic Party USAID train. So there you go. Augustine LaHaye claims Marxism is bad because it's woke. That guy focuses on cultural revolution instead of class struggle. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Ignacio, for the $5. So that's kind of what I was saying, but I thought maybe the Black Book of the New Left was a book about kind of like The Cultural Cold War by Francis Stone Saunders, where it talks about how this identity politics, culture-based left was funded by the CIA every step of the way, and it was done so in order to distract and move people away from a class-based left, working class-based organization. But then there's another side of that, right, where the right wing points at that and they say, you see this obsession with wokeism, this obsession with culture war issues and identity politics, that is actually Marxism, and that's what we need to fight against, and that's why we need to be anti-communist, and America is communist today. So the CIA created a fake left which distorts Marxism, and then the right wing points at it and says, no, this is real Marxism and this is why it's bad. And then real Marxism, the organization of the working class and the political and economic struggle based upon those class lines, gets distorted and left behind, and everyone gets real confused. So yeah, it sounds like an interesting book worth checking out. But I still haven't played the intro yet, my friends. So I will play it, and then we'll get talking about the DPRK and whatever else you guys want to talk about.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said. You look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard. interfere. We throw the old bastard right out on his ear. Farewell to High Sheriff Hazard.
Yup, we are back. We got another super chat already. Pranav Simha, thank you. What are your thoughts on, actually, I'm going to hit this later. Thank you so much for the super chat. I just want to hit a couple things first. Justin here says, man, if people use the energy on smearing you guys to actually build some trust in their own communities and educate them, their orgs might actually grow for once. Yes, it's mind-boggling, but I can't spend too much mental energy on it, you know, like, yeah, I've thought about it enough. Yes, these people are mentally ill. They're terminally online. They're socially isolated. And I mean, there's even proof of this. A lot of our biggest haters have tweeted out things about their depression or how they can't be in an organization because of their mental health. One of them tweeted recently that they wanted to end it all, which is tragic. I hope they don't. And I hope they're able to find some kind of peace. But like, you wouldn't spend all your time trashing a communist organization that's actually organizing in communities and in the streets if you had, you know, unless you have something going on in your life, unless you're struggling as an individual. And it's like, we just need to focus on the real life organizing, the real life building, and not get too caught up in this. Like, we need to keep in mind, or, you know, we need to pay attention to what people are saying on social media because it does matter. And, you know, these haters can, like, whether it's through Fed boosting or whatever, can have their posts blow up, and then that can influence how people see the ACP. So it's worth paying attention to on some level, but like, you know, we shouldn't put too much time, thought, and energy into it because these are antisocial people who aren't our target audience, right? You know, our target audience is people who can be won over, the American working class, the American masses. And I'm happy to win over anybody on the left, you know. But there are a lot of people on the left who are just more chill and more normal and aren't underneath every single one of my tweets, you know, calling for Haas's head on a pike or something crazy that these people are calling for. So yeah, I would love for them to direct all that energy towards forming their own organizations, like what I told Johnny Socialism and Andrew Saturn recently. I'm like, you know, they were telling us to like give up with the ACP or whatever. And I'm like, I would never want you guys to give up. You know, I wish you would put actual work into organizing your socialist party instead of just ankle biting us all day. But, you know, it's also anger and jealousy because of their own failures and their own inability to organize anything like what we have. So, yeah, you just can't take anything too personal. But thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. I was talking to an older gentleman today, and he soon figured out that I am a communist. And yes, questions, but that one kind of cuts off. All right, Pranav, what are your thoughts on USAID and NED defunding? Is it an inner elite struggle? What are the long-term implications? Great question. And if you want to see more in depth what my thoughts on this are, Carlos and I were actually on Legitimate Targets with our comrade Jackson Hinkle today. And this is one of the major things that we were talking about, the direction of the Trump administration, him obviously calling to occupy Gaza, which we talked about on last week's Power Hour. But then specifically the defunding of USAID, potentially the NED, or maybe they even already went through and cut government funding to the NED, and what to make of it and what all these leftist organizations are making of it. Because there are leftists right now, you know, fighting, doing protests, putting their time, energy, and labor into organizing to save USAID. And it's like, guys, even the most cursory geopolitical research will show you that USAID is nothing but the CIA. USAID funneled millions of dollars into Juan Guaido and the Venezuelan opposition, these basically terrorists who are trying to overthrow a sovereign socialist government. USAID has been involved anywhere around the world where the U.S. has done a regime change effort, including Ukraine in 2014, the main conflict going on in the world right now. And not even just in places where, you know, the U.S. wants to foment regime change, but in places where the U.S. puppet dictator is already in power. USAID, you know, funnels money to these kleptocracies and they do it under the guise of giving them developmental aid. They say we're doing development, basically like what China actually does is what USAID says that it does, which is why China has now jumped in and said, hey, if your USAID funding got cut, do business with us. We'll help you out. Except they're actually funding infrastructure and stuff. USAID is getting involved in meddling in other countries' politics. So, I mean, this might be a bit of a provocative statement. And obviously, you know, the last Power Hour, I shit on Trump for an hour and a half straight. I talked about how Trump is bad, how he's ripping off his base, how he's, you know, promised to end all the wars. Now he wants to occupy Gaza for, you know, certain financial and economic interests. And he's talking about it openly. Right. So I'm not pro-Trump. That being said, the move to dismantle USAID is objectively one of the most progressive moves that any president has taken in the modern era, which isn't saying much at all. But it, at the very least, is a monkey wrench in imperialism. And I don't know if there's some kind of long-term plan, if there's some kind of long-term psyop, and this is actually just a change in strategy for the U.S. empire. But I think it's likely that I really think Elon Musk has like the intellect of a middle schooler. And he really believes that USAID is a radical left organization. Now, why is this? Because Elon, like a lot of Americans, sees politics in terms of left and right based on cultural issues or social issues. Democrats versus Republicans. Democrats are left, Republicans are right. Now, of course, we're communists. We know that we're the actual left and Democrats are right-wing. They're liberals. But Elon really thinks that, and the face of U.S. imperialism, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, the face of U.S. imperialism right now, their strategy, their slogan is wokeism, right? It's we're going to drape ourselves in rainbow flags and claim that we're fighting for human rights and democracy and gay rights and trans rights, and we need to overthrow Iran's government because they don't have these things, and we need to bring it to them. That has been the face of U.S. imperialism. It's been this like liberal humanitarian interventionism, which is largely rooted in Samantha Power, one of the architects of the war on Libya, who was running USAID under the Biden administration, ironically, who wrote this book called The Case or the something Genocide. Somebody put the title of Samantha Power's genocide book in the chat, please. But it's this book that basically argues that a problem from hell. That's what it's called, a problem from hell. And it basically argues that there's all these evil dictators around the world suppressing Western liberal values. So we need to get more militarily involved and bring them human rights. And we're going to do it draped in a rainbow flag and with a BLM sticker slapped to our bombers that we're sending to bomb these African countries. So that's been the face of the empire for a while, and that's what Elon Musk calls left. That's what he considers to be the radical left. So I think it's likely that he actually thinks these organizations are left and is trying to destroy them because of that, because they're woke and have this liberal veneer, this liberal marketing that they do. That being said, ultimately, while it is a monkey wrench in the machinery of U.S. imperialism, and it provides a fantastic opportunity for communists to come in and make our arguments and win people over to our side, it could also just be a shift in strategy, right? That wokeism stuff is kind of dying. Everyone in the country is sick of it, and cancel culture and whatever else. And it could just be, you know, a new organization that does what the NED and USAID used to do, without, you know, draping it in a rainbow flag, without pink washing it or whatever, LGBTQ plus washing it. I could see that happening too. I could see them making a USAID 2.0 that does the same thing, but doesn't pretend to be progressive. You know, so it very well could just be a change in strategy for the U.S. empire. I think there are conflicts within the ruling class. I mean, that's basically what it is. But do Elon and Trump, like Haas was saying the other day on his stream, like, it's very difficult to build a state, but it's easy to tear down a state, right? So do Elon, Trump, and the people surrounding them have the ability to rebuild the U.S. empire if they start tearing all this shit down? I don't know. I think there's a very good chance that they're so stupid they don't realize what the machinery of empire actually is. So they're going after these organizations because they're woke or whatever, because they celebrated Pride Month on their social media accounts, without realizing that they're dismantling these arms of U.S. imperialism that have maintained the U.S.'s geopolitical and economic global hegemony for the last however many years, since the end of World War II. So it's one or the other. It's a change in strategy, or it's a monkey wrench being thrown in the machinery of empire. Either way, I see it as a good thing. I see it as an opportunity for us. But yeah, thank you for the $10. Amelia, $20. Holy cow, no question, but $20. Thank you so much. That's going right to the Eddie Liger New Computer Fund. ACP community here for you, Eddie. Let's go. Another red salute. Thank you, comrade. Stephen Saint Amant, $10. ACP community is here for you, Eddie. Hell yeah, I never doubted it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. ACP will have a new and improved computer and webcam on my desk very soon, and I can't wait. Thank you so much. I'm convinced the Dems are doing 5D chess alongside the GOP to make hating Elon seem cringe to normal people and get them on board. Now that's the real take there. That's it's just a whole big psyop. The Democrats are trying to make people like Elon, so they can get normal people on board. I mean, that's the whole strategy of these anti-wokes. This is why we say be neither woke nor anti-woke. Like, yeah, you have the people supporting and justifying U.S. imperialism by draping it in a rainbow flag and a BLM sticker. But then you have these right-wing grifters like Jordan Peterson who are like, that's Marxism. What they're doing now is Marxism. The Americas are, or America, the United States is a Marxist government. Didn't you see they had a rainbow flag on the White House lawn? We're moving to communism. They say this, right? And they point at wokeism, which is literally just liberalism, right? It's the extension of liberalism or liberal logic to like the utmost degree. Holy cow, big super chat. I'll get to that in a second. Thank you so much. This wokeism is really just liberalism, ultimate freedom for the individual, but no freedom for the collective, no sovereignty for these foreign states if they don't accept our individualistic laws and rights and protections, or individual-based cultural protections. The right-wingers pointed that and say it's Marxism. This is communism. And really, it's been propped up, like I said, by the CIA since the beginning. But those are the anti-wokes, and that's who's in power now, is these anti-wokes, these people who say we're against the establishment because we say offensive things and we don't believe in cancel culture. And it's like, no, you're still part of the establishment. Because you're still distorting Marxism. You're still not calling for class struggle or any substantive change. You're just complaining about the liberal left and acting like you're any different than them while supporting all the same shit when it comes to Israel and all the issues that actually matter economically and geopolitically. So keep it up, Taya Iaros. $50. Holy cow, that could pay for like a Chromebook already. I might as well just order the computer now. Holy shit. I knew the audience would come through. I'm like, if I tell the chat that I got my computer stolen, they're going to have me, they're going to give me enough money to buy a new one within a few weeks. And I was right. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Karl Marx says thank you. All he wants for Christmas are the means of production and a new computer. And thank you so much. And of course, we will keep it up. We'll never stop, no matter how many times they ban us. Even though I've been delisted, deboosted, shadow banned. Despite all that, we will keep going thanks to people like you. So appreciate you, comrade. That's extremely generous. How many countries has the DPRK invaded? Does helping Kampuchea count? No, it doesn't count. They invaded South Korea, don't you know? The Korean peninsula was divided forever. It was always split into two countries. And then one day, the DPRK, the northern part, turned communist and attacked the southern part for no reason. So the U.S. had to save them, don't you know? Just kidding, by the way. I'm completely kidding. The Korean peninsula was divided by the U.S., by a U.S. manufactured voting plan at the United Nations. The vast majority of the country supported the government in the north. And after they were attacked by the South repeatedly, or there were border skirmishes at least, it's the sources, primary sources aren't completely clear on who started the fighting, but it was more than likely the South who invaded the North. The North responded by sweeping through the South and liberating it, which was, the South was nothing but like the Southern Vietnamese government. It was nothing but a U.S. military dictatorship, a U.S. puppet state that had been carved out of the Korean Peninsula, which had been united for years. Nobody could even imagine a divided Korea back then. But that's what the U.S. did, just like they did in Vietnam, divided it up. But unlike Vietnam, the U.S. was able to keep this South Korean fascist government in power. Literally, I mean that in the literal sense of the word. Syngman Rhee was absolutely a Korean fascist, and that's who the U.S. installed and kept in power. And they were able to maintain that by just mass murdering all of the communists. They killed 20% of the North's population. Syngman Rhee basically mass murdered or imprisoned and tortured anybody with any kind of left-leaning ideology. And that's how he was able to stay in power, and South Korea was created. So yeah, and I would say the DPRK hasn't invaded any country. They were invaded by the U.S. They fought back and pretty much won. Yeah. Great question. This is a perfect segue into what I was just going to talk about too. So thank you, Pranav, thank you so much for the $4. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody who's given those super chats today. Do I think the DPRK will have an economic miracle like China has in the future? It won't be on the same scale as China, because the thing about China is there's 1.4 billion people. So, I mean, this is why, this is why it was so tragic that the USSR was destroyed, because it was this big, powerful socialist state that was able to defend itself and trade with other socialist states. And I love looking into smaller socialist countries, especially when I first became a communist. I love looking into like Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, these small countries who, in the face of U.S. imperialism, have been able to forge ahead and forge a new path. It's inspiring. I'm always a guy who's rooted for the underdog. But that being said, the more you study history, the more you realize, oh, no, communists actually have to be powerful, right? We actually have to be strong. We need to actually be able to defend ourselves. We can't just always be the underdogs. And that's what the USSR was. It was a strong, powerful, industrialized collection of socialist states. Plus, then you had the Eastern Bloc countries, and they were all united against the capitalist world. And they were essential in propping up or helping to fuel revolutions in smaller countries like the DPRK. And when the USSR fell, it was such a tragedy because all of these countries were cut off from their main trade partner. Cuba calls that the special period, where they had to go for years without the USSR had been buying their sugar in massive, almost irrational quantities in order to prop up the Cuban economy or help the Cubans invest in industrial development. So they had to all of a sudden go without that. They lost all this revenue. And the DPRK had a very same thing. They call it the Arduous March. It was the 1990s after the Soviet Union collapsed. And miraculously, and with the help of China somewhat, they were able to recover. And during COVID, their GDP contracted a little bit. Their economy shrunk. But now, if you look at new economic data, recent economic data from the Bank of Korea, they have rebounded incredibly. They have seen a 3% plus or an over 3% increase in their GDP after having a 0.02% contraction, which is actually a very small contraction with COVID and the U.S. sanctions and everything going on. But so their GDP increased, and their manufacturing output increased by over 8%. Their agricultural output increased. Their overall trade volume, this is the big stat, their overall trade volume increased by over 70%, which, on a small scale for a small socialist country, that is sort of an economic miracle. And what I think is really going on, because I mean, the DPRK's central economic planning and all the good things they've done economically, you know, their socialist system has allowed for this because they're putting development in the right places. But really, it was China loosening trade restrictions and opening up to way more trade with the DPRK. So what China's doing slowly but surely is stepping up, and in some ways, not in the same way, but in their own unique Chinese way, their own socialism with Chinese characteristics way, are filling the hole that was left by the collapse of the USSR and helping these countries by trading with them and investing in them. And they still, you know, they have this policy of mutual cooperation, mutual development, and complete non-interventionism. So it's not like China is doing what the USSR did and going around and funding these different revolutionary groups, communist groups around the world. They don't do that, but they will help countries develop their economies, develop industry, develop infrastructure, which of course advances the forces of production, which leads to revolutions that change the relations of production. So, you know, they're basically promoting socialism around the world without saying it. And I think that's similar to what they're doing with the DPRK. Like, we're going to give you favorable trade relations because you're a socialist communist country who's allied with us against the aggression of the United States. And it's leading to amazing results for the people. It's really awesome to see. I mean, people in the DPRK now have cell phones, and this has been going on for like a decade now. They're more than a decade. They've been focusing on technology, but they've had cell phones for a while. But the U.S. has had a freak out about these North Korean vloggers, these people who are just showing what day-to-day life is in the DPRK, which is enough, you know, to break the U.S. propaganda about the DPRK. You know, just somebody showing their day-to-day life going around the country is enough to shatter the illusions of the Western media that tell us, you know, every aspect of life in the DPRK is controlled directly by Kim Jong-un, down to what haircut you can have and stuff. And it's like that video of the two guys going to the DPRK and getting a haircut that went viral on YouTube because they disproved these Western media narratives that generally come from Korean defectors, the defector industry, and South Korean tabloids. They were debunking a lot of the propaganda, and that's one of the reasons that in 2017, travel and tourism to the DPRK was banned, which is so interesting because people say nobody's allowed to enter or leave the DPRK. No, they have, for one, the DPRK has many foreign exchange students and people who travel abroad. But for two, the main thing is the DPRK wants people to come. They want people to come see what it's like because, like I said, it shatters the illusions that are created by corporate media. But it's the U.S. who has banned travel. The authoritarian, autocratic U.S. government and Trump administration banned us from going to the DPRK, not the other way around. So thank you, HB, for the $10 super sticker. Appreciate you, comrades. Solidarity. Thank you. We got 12 super chats already. That's like a new record or something. $5 from Anthony ACP. Thank you, comrade. Thank you for being a part of the party. We appreciate you, our rank and file members, more than we can put into words here on the stream. How is North Korea good? you gotta, I mean, good is a very subjective word, but check out my playlist on the DPRK and listen to the things that I'm saying about it and their economic rebound and whatnot. The U.S. changing strategy, knowing that the nonsense from before won't work, is such a desperation move. Just join the ACP. Let's get to work. Hell yeah. Thank you for joining, comrade. And if you haven't joined yet, I'm sure a lot of the people in my chat have, but we're now doing a recruitment drive. Filtering a bunch of new members into the party or processing a bunch of new members and trying to get more. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. Those personal relationships, one-on-one relationships, are the best way to win people over. And if you're on the fence, join. If you don't know that much theory, nobody cares. We'll teach you theory once you join the party. We just need people who are willing to work and are willing to help, like Anthony here. So thank you, Anthony. And the U.S. changing strategy, knowing that the nonsense from before won't work, is a desperation move. I agree. It's a total desperation move. It's a sign of empire and liberalism in decay, which we all recognize. Even conservatives know we live in a decaying empire at this point. So there's going to be more and more desperation moves and oddities in American politics as the empire continues to decline. There's going to be more weird stuff like this orange celebrity Cheeto man, Donald Trump, coming to power by railing against the establishment and the capitalist class that he himself came from. There's going to be weird stuff like that, and things are going to get crazy, and the rules of liberal politics are going to be thrown out the window as things continue to decay. So we need to get organized now, right? There could be a point in the near future where the state collapses, right? And where there's anarchy and there's militia groups fighting each other. So are we just going to let the white nationalists and the Groypers be the only militia groups who are trained and organized and are ready to fight for this country, to fight for the direction of this country after liberalism fails? We can't be. We have to start getting prepared now, right? Even if that collapse doesn't come for another 40 years, which I think it'll come before that, we need to start getting prepared now. The longer we put it off, the worse. So as Anthony says here, let's get to work. We're already basically in World War III, right? The battle lines are being drawn. There's a proxy war going on in Ukraine between two of the world's largest superpowers. The multipolar world is rising, and I think that is going to lead that external geopolitical war is ultimately going to lead to internal sort of civil wars in every country as states start to collapse, or as the U.S. tries to draft Americans and send them to go fight and die against China, which no Americans want to do. That's going to lead to some insane political phenomena domestically, some massive uprisings and stuff like that. So we got to get ready. We got to get ready as fast as possible. Organize. I look forward to the day that we can finally have a guest on Midwestern Marx from Pyongyang. That would be amazing. I'd love that. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat, Alexia. I'm not sure what country that's coming from, but thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to it too. We have our podcast with Derek Ford, which was great. He's been to the North and the South quite a bit. I think that's one of the best videos that we have on the channel. But it would be great to talk with someone from Pyongyang. We've also had Don Corder on the channel, who's, I believe he's even met with Kim Jong-un or been in the same room with him or something. So, yeah, that's one of my dreams. People know, I think at this point, I have a special affiliation for the DPRK. The DPRK and Laos are like right here for me, right in my heart. Because, when I was learning about the DPRK, the Revolution Report, yeah, that's Don's channel. Go ahead and follow them. When I was first learning about the DPRK, I was resistant because I was still learning about communism. And I'm like, there's no way this country cannot be as evil and flawed and autocratic as I've been told by the media. They at least have to, the way that they portray the DPRK is so over the top and so comically evil. It's like, even if that's not true, they still have to be bad, right? They still have to be bad. And then the more you learn about them and their history and the U.S. history in that country, the more you become inspired by their struggle. And you're like, holy shit, my government killed 20% of their population. So that's one person in every family of 5. And the DPRK was killed by the U.S. And they refused to surrender. They refused to give up their sovereignty. And they refused to back down even after the U.S. put them under these stringent economic sanctions. And then the USSR collapsed, and they're still under these sanctions. They still survived. Like, these people are so dedicated to the collective. You can't help but start to see them as heroic and inspiring. So it was one of these things that taught me, the more somebody's been demonized by the U.S. media, the more good stuff they've probably done. And I just always thought their struggle was super inspiring. And who's been lied about more than the DPRK, So it gives you inspiration when they lie about the ACP too. Because it's like, if we weren't doing good things, if we weren't on the right track, they wouldn't be putting so much time, effort, and energy into lying about us. Same with the existing socialist states, not to say that we're on their level. Obviously, they've accomplished a lot more than us, but Laos is the same thing. Laos is for a different reason, though. Like, Laos just gets so overlooked. They're still a Marxist-Leninist socialist country trying to build communism, but The Vietnam War, as it's called, was not just the Vietnam War. It was a war on the whole of Indochina. The U.S. bombed the shit out of Cambodia too, or not the whole of Indochina. I guess because Thailand was part of it, and they got away with less damage than everyone else. But Cambodia was destroyed. Laos had more bombs dropped on it than any other country on earth in human history. But we never hear about that. We only hear about the atrocities committed on Vietnam specifically. But Laos was a part of this too. They had their own internal contradictions. The CIA was heavily active in Laos, funding the Hmong reactionaries. There were the Hmong people were an ethnicity with ethnic tensions with the Lao people and different ethnicities in Laos. And the U.S. and CIA preyed upon that and said, look, these Lao communists are coming to power and they hate you, the Hmong people. They stoked the ethnic divisions, as the U.S. always does. They stoked the racism and gave a bunch of guns and funding to the Hmong people who would sabotage the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So the CIA and the U.S. military cared deeply about Laos during that time. It just gets overlooked because of all the horrific atrocities inflicted upon Vietnam. Cambodia gets overlooked too, but the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through Laos. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, which, the North Vietnamese were the communists, the South Vietnamese were the U.S. base of support. The Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through Laos from North Vietnam into South Vietnam. So it was the way that the North Vietnamese were able to bring supplies and stuff like that to the battlefield, the place where all the fighting was going on. And the U.S. sabotaged this. They tried to bomb it. The Hmong people would attack supply caravans on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But Laos paid a massive price in winning that war. And the fact that the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through Laos is an example of that. Is goes to show the essential role that they played in defeating the imperialists. And it gets overlooked. And all we know about Laos today, pretty much, is Americans, if Americans even know this, is that the country's covered in unexploded bombs. I guess all the good bombs were going to Cambodia and Vietnam, and they would drop the bad, maybe dud bombs on Laos. So there are all these unexploded bombs across the Laotian countryside, which Obama gave them a few bucks to try and clean up a few years ago. It's like, thanks, man. Thanks for killing so much of our population and helping us clean up the bombs afterwards. And it was probably regime change money anyways. Yeah, and those bombs are known to explode and kill people like every few years or so. So they're still suffering from the effects of that. And it's just like, people don't even know that Laos is socialist, that they're governed by a Marxist-Leninist government. And their leaders at the time, they're intellectuals. Like, Laos is a very agrarian country, and Vietnam is very industrial. They have, a lot of big cities and industry, whereas Laos is more agrarian, so they have less like intellectuals and stuff. But the Marxist theory, is coming out of Laos, especially like in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed, was very interesting. Good stuff to read, just about how they're going to survive and the direction that they're going to move with their economy. So shout out to Laos. Shout out to my boys. My cousin's been to Laos. I want to go soon. They opened up to tourism in like the 90s or 80s and 90s because they knew the USSR was going to collapse. I've been playing the game Homefront and the sequel where North Korea invades the U.S. Originally, it was supposed to be the Chinese and said, no way, that's an actual game. Thank you, Battle Cossack, for the 50 Argentinian bucks. That's a real game. How is there a game where the DPRK invades the U.S.? Like, how is that a realistic plot line? Do people know how big the DPRK is? Do they recognize you could fit the DPRK within the U.S. like 50 times over? Do they know how much larger our population is? Do they know that the DPRK never invaded us, but we invaded them and killed 20% of their population and kept them under the second most stringent sanctions on Earth ever since? What a ridiculous game. It's unironically a fun campaign to play. I don't doubt it. A lot of those anti-communist games are actually fun. SAO documentary has a good playlist entitled North Korea World. Shows everyday life in the DPRK. Definitely worth checking out for everyone. Yeah, and there's a movie called My Brothers and Sisters in the North that I watched when I was learning about the DPRK. It's just a lady from the South who goes to the North, and she it's cool. The reason I love My Brothers and Sisters in the North is because it's not sensationalist at all. It's just documentary style, showing what day-to-day life is like for the Korean people. And like I said, showing their day-to-day life is enough to break the U.S. propaganda, to shatter the illusion of the U.S. lies. Because these people are, she goes to a farm and it's a collective farm, and talks to the farmers, the people who are working the land and growing the crops. She goes to a factory where they're making clothing, like a textile factory. She goes to a school where they're training kids. And, you get to see, like, for one, they're people just like us. And it builds, empathy, and it humanizes them, because so much of the propaganda is aimed at dehumanizing them. They're not even people, they're robots. And this movie shows you, no, they're just people going through everyday life just like you. But they also have this beautiful and admirable dedication to their country and their socialist project and the collective, and this deep, deep sense of patriotism and this commitment to self-determination and independence that is so admirable. And you walk away from the movie just like so inspired. I did anyways. So there are good movies like, my playlist about the DPRK. I would tell people to check that out. There's Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang is a good movie by PSL's Liberation School, I believe it's called. Or I don't know, it's whatever. PSL's like movie making wing, their media wing. Did Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang and Seoul, which is great. Talks about the North Korean or the South Korean defector industry or North Korean defector industry and how that works, and how South Korean intelligence lures people out of the DPRK and then tortures them into saying it's the worst thing ever, or offers them tons and tons of money if they say it's the worst thing ever. And a lot of these people are now like, I wish I would have never left. It was the biggest mistake I ever made. I was tricked, blah, blah, blah. So that's a good movie for that. But I really recommend checking out My Brothers and Sisters in the North. It's on the ACP reading guide because we added movies and video content for this edition. I told Carlos, you got to put this movie on there because I just love the style. It's such like a working class movie. Like, we're just going to show how the working class of this socialist country lives day to day, unbiased. And you walk away like, holy cow, these people are freaking great. And there's also interesting things like they try to establish like a meritocracy where like the workers who work the hardest and do the most get rewarded for that, which, they don't have that much money to be giving away to these people. They're under these stringent U.S. economic sanctions just trying to survive. But, like in the textile factories, if you're like a good employee, you get rewarded for that, which is obviously not what happens in capitalism. The wage rates of every market tend to equalize. And, this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, we all know it's a big myth. So they try to actually establish a meritocracy in a way. It's very, very interesting and cool. And my favorite is she also goes to, sorry, I'm rambling about this movie now, but she also goes to the water park in Pyongyang. And there's this water park employee. My two favorite parts of the movie, or I don't know, there's a lot of favorite parts of the movie. There's one part where the kids are singing a song about their country. That part's touching. There's another part where she's interviewing this collective farmer, and he's talking about the socialist system and why it's better and why everybody needs to care about the society, the collective, and not just themselves. But there's also this part where she interviews a water park employee in Pyongyang, and the guy starts to cry because he's so inspired and passionate about his job working the front desk of a water park. But the reason for that is because the labor isn't alienated, right? In the U.S., if you're working at a water park, you're probably just doing it over the summer to make some money before you go back to school and try to get a higher paying job. And, you're just bored behind the desk all day, twirling the whistle or whatever, if you're a lifeguard, waiting to get paid. But this guy had this deep love for it because he knew the water park was a symbol of his whole country and their entire system. And he knows that, or they know, the working class there knows that their labor is going towards the development of their whole society. So they're not just laboring for some Wall Street shareholder. They're laboring for the country as a whole. The actual surplus, the actual product of their labor will be reinvested in them and in their family and in their community. So it's far less alienated than the labor here in the United States. And you can see that with these people, especially this guy who's crying because he's so proud of his job at a water park. Because he's like, no, what I'm doing is actually, super beneficial for my country. I'm honored to be here. It's quite amazing. But I'm sure Kim Jong-un was just holding him at gunpoint, making him cry. So, as Yeonmi Park would say. Thank you for becoming a member, Beta Lire. Please check out Carlos's The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which I have up there. It's blocked by the logo right now, but it's you get a free PDF when you become a $10 YouTube member. So thank you so much. Enjoy that book. Enjoy the perks that you get as a member. We're happy to have you. Thailand is now joining BRICS, and their largest trade partner is China-based. Yeah, Thailand is interesting. Very interesting internal political situation there. My mom was crying because of a documentary where they show how in Laos they eat monkeys and how it's made. Thank you, Battle Cossack, for another 50. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. That's what they do with China, too, right? It's like China has abolished absolute poverty. China had the fastest increase in human life expectancy ever seen in human history under Mao. And people will be like, yeah, but don't they eat dogs? Don't they eat dog, though? Oh my God. Actually, China has cracked down on the eating of dogs because of probably in reaction to all the propaganda about it. And it's like, it's not the government doing it. It was just a cultural practice that existed for years. And there was, now they've like begun persecuting all these people who sell dog meat underground. So there's there was a black market for dogs for a while. I don't know if they've been successful in cracking down on it or if they're still eating dogs or what, but it's like, come on, bro. Have you hung out with a pig? Have you raised a pig? I've raised pigs. I'm from Wisconsin and Iowa. I'm from the Midwest. I've raised hogs. Hogs are got to be one of the smartest animals I've ever seen. Dadgummit. These hogs, they're about smarter than me. You ever read that George Orwell book, Animal Farm? There's a reason the piggies are the smartest animals on the farm, because that's what they are in real life. They're intelligent. For real, though, the pigs are extremely intelligent. Extremely. And you get attached to them. They become like pets when you raise them, and then you bring them to the fair, and they're butchered, and you eat them. And it's like a sad fact of life, but... or not that sad, honestly. It's life. Life eats life. Yeah, if you're okay with, my point is that if you're okay with eating pigs, you should be okay with eating monkeys and dogs too, honestly. Same with cows. Cows aren't as smart as pigs, but still. They're just nice. They're docile. They just hang out. And then you cut their heads off and eat them. So Orwell was a traitor. F him. Damn right. Orwell was horrible. I love that Hakeem video on Orwell. That is so good. I reached out to Hakeem, by the way, today. If people want to help me contact Hakeem, I reached out to Hakeem, Ugopnik, and Second Thought, and I said we should have a meeting to squash any beefs that exist. And start maybe working together a little bit and uniting, because I think they do good work at the D program. I really do. And I always thought the beef between them and Haas was avoidable. And I think Haas agrees now, years later. I mean, it was years ago too. So it's like, we both want the same thing. We all want the end of U.S. empire, and we all want the advancement of the American working class. So let's work together to achieve that, Seems like common sense, but I get it, people's personal issues get in the way. People have resentments, it's very, very hard to manage a collective and keep that collective running smoothly and keep those relationships working. But it's like, you don't, those guys, my message to those guys, Second Thought, JT, Ugopnik, and Hakeem, would be, you can hate us as much as you want. You can hate our guts on a personal level. You can never forgive Haas and the infrared community for the beef that you had back in the day. But still, let's work together and let's unify around the issues that matter. Let's unify around class struggle and anti-imperialism, because it's not about what we think of each other on a personal level. I happen to really like those guys on a personal level. They've always been really cool to me. I like watching their shows. I think they do a good job. I think they're nice people. But even if you don't feel the same way about me, if you think I'm an asshole, well, we still have the same political goals. And we're communists, we're collectivists, so let's work together collectively for those goals. That's how I feel about it. And that's how I feel about any organization. You know, there were people on my wrestling team who I didn't like. Well, I kind of like everybody, but there were people on my wrestling team who didn't get along, right? And they just knew they're not going to hang out with each other, but still they're rooting for the same goal. They're still working together every day in practice to achieve winning a national title, winning as many matches as possible. It's the same thing with communism. You know, the Christian Parenti has this really good thing where he's talking about the Sandinistas, and he says some of the Sandinistas were assholes. They were not good people. They were womanizers or whatever else, but they were good organizers. And it's like, yeah, politics is not personal. Haas is always saying it's not personal. It's objective. You know, we have the same goals. I would argue that if you're a good person, you should support communism. You should support the struggle of the working class and anti-imperialism. But you can support that and not be a good person on a personal level, or not be fun to hang out with. And it doesn't matter. You know, we'll still work with you. You have to be able to work with people you don't like. I think that's a fact of life, not just a fact of communist organizing. Your thoughts on climate crises and its relation to the time it'll take for the American proletariat to wake up. Yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard thing because, like, you know, how do you care about the environment when you can barely make ends meet? You know, how do you spend all this time worrying about this existential crisis of ecological degradation, is what I like to say. I don't like to use the word climate change as much because it's kind of been co-opted by liberals, and it doesn't tell the whole story. It's the overfishing of waterways, the extinction of certain species, the irrational capitalist cultivation of the soil that ruins the soil. It's the endless wars, that destroy forests and stuff. There's deforestation, right? There's all these different things that could be put under the category of ecological degradation that result from the anarchy of capitalism, right? Capitalism is not a planned mode of production. Well, it kind of is now. It's just planned by Wall Street and the Fed and stuff, but it's a very anarchic mode of production that can't be even if it is planned, it's not planned rationally. It's not planned by people who are saying what's the best for our population and what's the best for our environment. It's planned by people who want to make as much money as possible for private individuals. Capitalism creates all these crises. It creates what's been called metabolic rifts in the Earth's natural recycling processes. That's all that so-called climate change is a metabolic rift in the process of air and how it recycles itself. I can't get into the chemistry. I'm not good at science. But it stems from the irrationality of capitalism. And it's a good thing to point out, especially if you have someone who does care about the climate crisis. You have to explain to them that socialism is the only way to solve it. The only way to get around this is to pursue things like nuclear and renewable energy, which capitalism is never going to do. Fossil fuels are easy to store, and so-called fossil fuels are easy to store, and they're extremely powerful. So why is an organization, a Wall Street, why is a company owned by Wall Street shareholders going to move towards renewables if that's going to hurt them? And their competition in the market is using oil. They're going to be outcompeted. So there's an economic incentive under capitalism to use these do practices that are do irreversible damage, or maybe in some cases reversible damage to the ecology, to the environment. And when you have socialism, ecology can be taken into account when you're planning the economy. The economy can adapt, which is why China has all these amazing cities that put American cities to shame, that are carbon zero, that are run with different energy sources and whatever else. So we need socialism to combat the climate crisis, but at the same time, the Democrats benefit and have weaponized climate anxiety. right? Be worried about the climate. Be worried about the climate. Be worried about the climate. Your kids aren't going to have an earth to inherit. Think about it all day. All day. You're worried about your own problems. You need to be worried about the melting ice caps. And then, you know, of course, the what follows from that is, and that's why you need to vote for the Democrats, because the Democrats support green capitalism, and it's a psyop, because there is no green capitalism. Like I said, capitalism can never adapt itself to these problems. Capitalism is too anarchic of a mode of production. Only socialism can adapt our modern technological industrial economy to the needs of the ecology. Only socialism can incorporate ecological knowledge into production. Capitalism has no capability to do that. So the Democrats are inducing everyone with this climate anxiety and marketing everyone this green capitalism. And it's bullshit. It's not going to do anything to reverse the ecological damage that we've already done. But it's only going to exacerbate the political and economic crises that we're already seeing. It's just like add ecological crises on top of all the political and economic crises. And even under socialism, it'll be difficult to combat ecological degradation, right? A lot of work is going to need to be done in order to adapt our economy to one that's more sustainable. But, you know, under capitalism, it's just straight up impossible. You know, that's why none of the you know, all these capitalist countries got together in South America or did they no, they got together in France, right? That's why it's called the Paris Climate Accords. Yeah, it's been Paris. I thought they had a different summit in South America, but the Paris Climate Accords, they're like, all right, we agree to hit all of these goals to save the environment, and none of them have been hit. You know, because these countries don't control their economies. Their economies are controlled by Wall Street shareholders, so they have no power to actually rein them in. And I remember I took a class. This is one of the ways that I met Carlos, was at this college class we took, which was taught by a Marxist with a specialty in China who had traveled to China. He writes for Midwestern Marx now. Great inspiration for me. Amazing scholar. Helped turn me into a communist and introduced me to Marxist literature. But anyways, he taught a class it was basically a class on eco-socialism. He had to start by reading these books about the state of the ecology and overfishing and deforestation and the extinction of species and all these things. And then he had us read a Malthusian book called Ishmael, which is one of these books that says humans are the disease. You know, humanity is what's wrong with the world. Humanity is infecting nature. And when humanity goes away, nature can heal and go back. You know, this Malthusian anti-human, I would say satanic idea, really. And, you know, so that got everybody in the class scared about climate change. And then he introduced us to books about eco-socialism. He introduced us to books that say, here's how we can plan the economy in a way that's in harmony with nature and the Earth's natural processes, these metabolic processes. And that was a good book. I'm trying to think of what point I was trying to make with that, though. Oh, yeah. So there was a simulation that we did in the class. There was a simulation where we were going to like a meeting, a summit about the climate, like the Paris Climate Accords. We were simulating one of those meetings, and we all had to be different world leaders. And we were able to solve climate change. We were able to make the necessary changes within seconds. Right? We were just like, let's move towards renewables, and let's implement nuclear, and let's wean off of fossil fuels. Like, okay, break. And that's an unrealistic simulation because that's not how it works in real life. These politicians are beholden to the capitalists, not the other way around. These politicians are beholden to the Wall Street shareholders and the people who are trying to make money selling commodities in the market. So even if Obama wanted to make all of these progressive changes to save the environment, he can't, because he's a puppet of Wall Street and these profiteers. So that simulation was a wake-up call for me, like, oh, we could stop ecological degradation and so-called climate change. We could fix this situation, but we don't control our economy because we live under capitalism. If we controlled our economy, it'd be kind of not easy, but be a lot of stuff we could implement tomorrow that the market won't let us implement today. I have a bit of bit more hope for the U.S. because of the ACP, but zero hope for Europe, where I live. Sock them, anti-communism is a disease. Thank you, Pavel. Thank you so much for the €6. Appreciate it. Glad you have hope for the U.S. Yeah, I was talking to someone about European politics today. It's rough. It's like the social safety nets that they have are being dismantled. Everything that the working classes in Europe have fought for is being taken away. And rather than moving back towards socialism and communism, they seem to be moving to the right. The people who are radical and dissenting against the establishment are fascists. And then, these European SOCDEMs, these European liberals, have this like superiority complex over the US. Like, you guys are so stupid, you're so dumb, we're so much more advanced than you. And it's almost like blinded them from all this horrible shit that's going on in their countries, right? And in reality, of course, they're puppets of NATO. They're puppets of the US. So it's like, what do you mean you're better than us? You're literally our horrible government's bitch. The giant banks who own us, they own you too. You Europeans, I don't know what you're so high and mighty about. Not you, Pavel, you're the man. But yeah, it is a disease. Like, and part of it, Europe boys nowadays, they, tend to lag behind the US in a lot of stuff, or take influence from the US in a lot of stuff. But the situation's almost worse because we don't have social democracy in the US anymore. We have neoliberalism. We have a totally privatized healthcare system, an almost fully privatized education system, and we recognize that these things are bad. In Europe, they've held on to, semblances of the welfare state and the social safety net. And it's made people comfortable, right? Like, all the leftists in Europe are just trying to cling on to that social safety net instead of fighting for new things, instead of fighting for something more radical, instead of taking a revolutionary position. So I think that will change with time, and especially with the decay of the US empire, because Europe is obviously going to be tied in with that. And they already are. There's a cost of living crisis in Germany and these other European countries because of the sanctions on Russia, because they're going along with the US proxy war against Russia. So the decay of the US empire is already having extremely negative effects on Europe. And eventually they'll figure it out, but there's going to be a lot of fascists running around and a lot of chaos until they do. They're going to have to rediscover communism the same way that many of us have here in America, and through the ACP. And communities like Midwestern Marx and Infrared, like those kind of communities are going to need to come about in Europe and start getting to work. And I know they are in some places. There's a lot of parties, new parties and old parties, who are now moving the right direction in Europe. And I, pray that they can continue to do more. But I would say the situation there is less hopeful than the situation here in the US, for sure. Not even, I would say it's not even close. So Turkey has the TLP. If that's the party I'm thinking of, they are pretty based. Our buddy Ruslan of RTSG, I don't know much about Turkey, but he has connections with this Turkish Communist Party that seems super based. And if Ruslan is saying it's based, I trust him, because he's one of these people who's been hypercritical of Putin's Russia, and he's not just jumping on board with any country. He's been hypercritical of Iran, making very fair critiques. So if he gives them his support, I tend to trust him on that. Europe needs mid-European Marx and Infrarouge. Infrarouge. Let me fucking screenshot that shit. That's awesome. Mid-European Marx and Infrarouge. You know what we need to do? Once we get our shit together a little bit here in America, once we have a real strong base, we will create proxy organizations to do battle with the NED and USAID funded organizations in Europe. We'll create ACP proxy organizations, and they will absolutely be called Mid-European Marx and Infrarouge. That's just like, if I had to think of European names for Midwestern Marx and Infrared, like, those are perfect. Isn't there a Midwest in like the UK too? Isn't there a certain region that they call the Midwest in like England? Yeah, that would be the middle of the UK. Well, if Ruslan says they're based, they must be amazing. Yeah, right. Ruslan is not afraid to criticize other anti-imperialists and leftists, and I like it. Balkan Marx, proletarian internationalism, you bet. Europe is a vassal of the U.S. Over a dozen U.S. military and air bases across the region. I happen to think the U.S. blew up Nord Stream as well. They're not even sovereign, sad to say. No, they're not. They have had their sovereignty stripped from them, similar to us in the U.S. The same financial cartels and banking oligarchs that run the U.S. government also completely control the European governments. As does NATO and the other arms of U.S. imperialism, the NED, USAID. And yeah, the U.S. absolutely blew up Nord Stream. Is that even debate? Is that even up for contention? I mean, it's like an obvious. Whether the U.S. did it themselves or had one of their proxies do it or had the Ukrainians do it, either way, we know who did that. And it was so crazy. Like Philip DeFranco on TikTok, who just parrots the mainstream media, U.S. State Department narratives, whatever it may be. He was saying that Russia blew up Nord Stream. Russia blew up their own pipeline, which was super important pipeline that was making them tons of money. They blew it up. For why? For what? What interest did they have? What motivation did they have to do that? Not explained. Nope, Russia did it because they're evil and Putin's evil. All right, Phil DeFranco, whatever you say, you dumbass. Like, how could you go that hard for the U.S. State Department? How could you throw your critical thinking out of the window that hard? Because if you've watched Philip DeFranco for a while like me, you know he's not a dumb guy. He's a somewhat intelligent man. And you think that Russia did a terrorist attack on their own pipeline that was vital to their economy. What? No, it was the U.S. because the U.S. was trying to enforce. They were trying to get these European countries like Germany to cut off Russia and go along with the U.S. sanctions. And a lot of them didn't want to because Europe is much closer to Russia than it is to the U.S. So Russia was a vital trade partner for them. And they knew it would be horrible and devastating for their economies if they did cut off Russia. So the U.S. said, guess what? If you're not going to do it, we're literally going to bomb you and destroy your infrastructure between Europe and Russia. That's what it was. The U.S. had been pushing for Europe to cut off Russia, the EU to cut off Russia forever. And the Nord Stream bombing was them saying we're not going to take no for an answer. Pavel, thank you for another €6, comrade. Appreciate you so much. People look at me as if I'm insane when I tell them to read Marx, Lenin, and Stalin. I try to read and I start to integrate myself in my community. Yeah, you just got to read and then talk to people normally, and then once you get to know them, once you have that connection and that friendship and that trust built up with them, then you hit them with the Marx, Lenin, Stalin, right? We don't have to walk around with posters of Stalin and expect people to just accept that he was a good guy, a man who fought for the working class right away. We have to recognize that there's been a lot of propaganda to get them to hate these figures, right? And first, we have to win their trust. First, we have to show them that most importantly, we're fighting in their interests, right? We're fighting for you, the working class. Then once they trust you, once you've been on the strike line with them, once you've been fighting with them for better pay and benefits or whatever it is they want, and you get them to agree with a lot of the stuff that you're saying, then you can invite them to the party and tell them to read. Now, don't be afraid to tell people that you're a communist, right? Do not be afraid to say, I am a communist. I believe in communism, right? That's something that you should probably be upfront about most of the time. But when it comes to like introducing them to literature, trying to get them to join a party or something, you really got to build that relationship with them first. And then if you see if they seem open to it, then you introduce them to literature. Then you've made yourself another cadre, another comrade. But that takes time. Good work though, Pavel. Keep it up. Lenin's imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Thank you, Wade, for the $10. Appreciate you, comrade. Imperialism is essential to understanding how the wealthiest banking families subordinate nations, our own included. Absolutely. I always say this. This is why I have a reading guide of Lenin's imperialism. 1.5 reading guides. I never got around to finishing the second one. Maybe I will someday when I'm not swamped with party work and Midwestern Marx work and wrestling. But the reason I did that is because I always say I studied politics for 4 years in college. And that book, that small 120, 130 page book written in 1917 or published in 1917, taught me more about the global political situation, taught me more about politics and geopolitics than anything I had read in 4 years of undergrad, right? It made the whole thing make sense to me. It made, I was starting to see that the economy is what's really in control and politics is just a reflection of the economy. And the U.S. is this hegemonic empire that dominates the rest of the world. But the inner workings of that system, Lenin's imperialism, helped me to understand. And it's like, it just seemed like common sense, right? It helped connect the dots for me with everything I had been learning over the past few years in undergrad, and said everything that I had been thinking in an incredibly simple and easy to understand way, and in a very well-researched way that shows, who's actually in charge, who's actually in power, how did they make their money, how did they come to power, how did these monopolies form, and how the imperialism of today, the political imperialism that we see, is actually economic imperialism and rooted in capitalism. And this isn't to say imperialism never existed before capitalism. It absolutely did. But what we're experiencing now is a unique, specific, particular capitalist form of imperialism, which is based on controlling markets in other countries, controlling the resources and labor in other countries, exporting capital like oil drills to other countries so the resources can be sucked out and brought back here. The surplus value can come back here. Obviously, reading Marx's Capital Volumes 1, 2, and almost 3. I'm very close to being done with 3. Working on it every day. That just shows what Lenin was building his analysis off of in imperialism, and helps you understand it even on a whole new level. Essential book, the most essential book for understanding the world today. I'll die on that hill. Thank you so much, Wade. If you gave me a ticket to Seoul or Pyongyang, it's an easy choice. Facts. I'm going straight to Pyongyang, baby. My friend and I got in a debate. This was a while ago now. It was like years. But he was saying if he could go anywhere, it'd be Japan. And I was like, bro, I'd go to China. And we got in like this argument where he's like, why would you go to China, not Japan, dude? Japan. I'm like, what, do I want to buy girls' underwear from a vending machine and get groped on the subway and live in poverty and not be able to complain about it and be socially isolated and watch anime all day? Like, China's kicking Japan's ass in every way. I would love to go to Japan, dude. Japan's a cool culture, well, they've got their issues, but they've got their good things as well. Japan's a cool society, but like, and this guy, my friend, he just likes anime. I'm like, you don't know shit about Japan, bro. You just watch anime. You just watch these cartoons, where, by the way, the artists are working like 14-hour days for shit pay to try and churn out these cartoons, which is why there's so much filler and why so many of the episodes are just complete ass, because they don't want to spend the money on hiring more workers to do new episodes. But anyways, side rant. DC abolished slavery, then proceeded to create the 40-year mortgage and mandatory overtime. Yeah, I mean, debt really is a form of slavery. And that's what's so interesting about Capital Volume 3 is it gets into debt and rent, which there's so much to build off of that with, because debts and rents are like the main way that the capitalist class makes surplus value today. It's not actually through industrial production, producing real things and selling them on the market. It's through debt trapping us and then charging us just to live on the land that they own, the chunk of earth that they own, and buying up as much of that as possible. And that is being concentrated in fewer hands. But that's where a lot of their surplus value comes from. And it's so unproductive and parasitic. It's like even way more parasitic than industrial capitalism or the era of capitalist competition, free competition, which kind of existed back in the day, never fully existed. But the version of capitalism that we have today is so parasitic, and the seeds of all of it are laid out and explained and analyzed in Volume 3. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are kind of like the necessary backstory, the 1,500 pages of backstory you need to get to Volume 3, where you really start to grasp the American economy today, and you start to say, oh, now I get it. Like, I mean, volume 1 will get you to do that too, right? But for me, when I started reading Capital, I had already studied politics for 4 years, and I studied economics in college. I think I had a minor in business, but my parents just wanted me to have a backup plan to get a business minor. So I just used it to study economics because, some economics courses were incorporated in the business minor. And that's what I wanted to learn about because I was starting to understand the connection between economics and politics. So I had already studied this stuff for a while before reading Capital. So I was already thinking about how the U.S. economy functions. And, Capital Volume 1 is a great book, a book that helps change the way that you see the world. Volume 2 is very boring, but necessary and interesting, boring at parts. But then Volume 3 was when all my questions that arose in my head when I was studying economics in college, that's the volume that answered all those questions or put all those questions to bed or gave me the tools to expand Marx's research and analysis to understand what I wanted to know about the American economy today, which is so dominated by rentiers and creditors. So yeah, read all 3 volumes. I know it's hard. I know it takes a lot of time. Just do a little bit per day. And I promise you it'll be worth it. Those books are Marx's masterpiece, the masterpiece of the smartest man who's ever lived. So, Seoul seems so depressing. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's a cool city, but like there's a lot of depression and social isolation and very weird ideologies in South Korea that stem from their conditions as a country, them being an artificially created capitalist state that only exists because the U.S. has propped them up. Hassan Piker's recent trip to Japan showed the activities you can do there. What did he do? Oh, the maid outfit? Was that in Japan? I didn't even know. I should have known. I should have known if that man was in a maid outfit. He was somewhere in Japan. But, oh, Hassan. Are you guys going to visit China? Yeah, Carlos is going this summer, I believe, actually. It's an intellectual trip, not anything with the party, but obviously, Carlos represents the party because he's in leadership. So anything he does is by proxy a party thing. But do you agree with the statement that the U.S. is headed towards techno-feudalism? I mean, it is kind of like that, but it's it's still capitalism, right? Even if it's kind of like feudalism because of all the renters, it's still a capitalist form, right? Like these plots of land can still be bought and sold on the market. They're commodified. You don't have peasants who are working the land for landlords and keeping some of it for themselves and then giving tithes to the landlord. That's feudalism. It's still a capitalist form of renting and landlordship and land ownership. So it's just, I would say it's just capitalism, developed to a higher stage. If you want to call that higher stage techno-feudalism, go for it. But I just see it as a natural development of capitalism. Thomas Paine. Yeah, I've been reading Thomas Paine a lot lately. I just finished Common Sense, one of the greatest American thinkers that we've had. Extremely radical for the time. Extremely radical. Eddie, you're a legend. Learned so much from you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Supporting the DPRK is just harming the cause in the U.S. and the world. Good Lord. No, my friend. The more you learn about the DPRK, the more you'll realize that you are actually harming the cause, because this is just liberalism. And if you live in the U.S., your country killed 20% of the DPRK's population and put them under the most stringent economic sanctions on earth. But because of socialism and because of their sheer will, they've been able to survive, and now their economy is expanding, actually even faster than the U.S. And, you know, it's not the same economy as the US. They're poorer largely because of those sanctions, but they take care of their people better than us in many ways when it comes to healthcare metrics or literacy rates, or even the food that their people are getting in certain ways, even though it's hard for them to come by food because of the U.S. sanctions. Now they have established like food sovereignty where they can grow enough for their people. But you need to check out, if you're actually interested in learning, if you're not just trolling, if you actually care about the struggle and the movement, you need to check out those movies I recommended to you earlier, My Brothers and Sisters in the North, Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang. Oh, look at that. You gave me a thumbs up. See, StreamYard wants you to watch these. And then check out my playlist. It just search Midwestern Marx DPRK. You'll see a playlist of about 13 videos. And if you watch those videos and still think that the DPRK are evil, or their struggle for socialism and independence and sovereignty and against U.S. imperialism isn't worth supporting, if you still think that after watching those two movies and the videos I've done, then I don't know what to tell you. But please, 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 please give them a watch. If you're calling yourself a socialist or communist and going around saying that the DPRK is evil, please do your due diligence. As Mao Zedong said, no investigation, no right to speak. And investigate that. Watch those videos. If you disagree with them after watching them, fine. But at least do the research before you speak confidently on this, because I can tell you that your view of the DPRK is deeply colored by U.S. propaganda, which is more pernicious and nefarious than you could even imagine. And watching those videos, watching my playlist on the DPRK will show you how that propaganda is produced, how it's manufactured. And pushed out on a mass scale in order to manipulate people about this country that the U.S. is putting so many resources towards destroying, and they have for over 70 years. Why would the U.S. empire put that many resources into destroying a certain country if they weren't doing something right or admirable or intelligent? They wouldn't. So don't give credence to U.S. imperialist narratives. Don't support the U.S. war against North Korea, the DPRK, which is still ongoing, never ended. They're still occupying the South. And do your research. I visited China a few months ago, and it was surreal to see what communism has achieved. Yeah, I'm hearing that from all my friends who go. All my friends, like Dante Munoz, my TikTok buddy, went the other day. He's just like, bro, he called me. He's like, bro, the hype is real. That's all. That was the first thing he said. And then he told me about his experience. It's amazing, you know, and when you have, cities that have been designed for the collective, that have been designed not just to take people from one consumer one place where they can consume to the other, you know, from the mall to the Chick-fil-A, like America. When you have stuff that's actually integrated, you can walk out of your apartment sometimes and get right on the subway, and it can take you to, there's more public parks and, you know, areas where people can hang out in public and be together. It's just I've heard it's a different sense that you get. A different feeling that you get from being there. It's very similar to what people say about the Soviet Union. Like, what they miss isn't necessarily like the material things. I mean, they do miss these things like free daycare, free healthcare, paying 1% of their income in rent. I mean, former Soviet citizens talk about missing these things. But the main thing that they miss is that collective culture, that collective sense of we're all one, you know, we're all part of the society, and we all need to work together to make it better. That's what they really miss. And that's what you get in a socialist society like China, I think. I've never been. But based on what a lot of my friends who have been there tell me, you know, that's sort of the feeling that they get. And say it's even on another level. A lot of my friends have been to the DPRK. And they tell me there it's even on another level. They don't have the same, they don't have the same amount of wealth as China. But the sort of sense of collectivity there is really inspiring and like amazing. Like, you can see kids running around in the streets at night and they're totally safe. They don't have to worry about crime. You know, like, that's just a completely different kind of society than what we can even imagine in the U.S. Imagine letting your kids run around in New York City at night. They're going to get kidnapped. Question. Thank you so much, Paperwin, member of the Midwestern Marx Discord community, which you can all join at the Midwestern Marx link tree. Member of the Infrared community and OG of the ACPs. Thank you so much for the, what is that, 1,000 yen? I don't know what that is in American dollars, but it's gold. So that means it's got to be good. And 1,000 is a big number. So thank you so much. Question: are ACP haters' enmity towards us rooted in one, their genes, or two, their souls? I don't believe in genes that much. I think I'm more of a nurture versus nature kind of guy. I think a lot of their parents failed them. I think a lot of their parents failed to make them honorable, upstanding, honest people for whatever reason. And yeah, now we have to deal with them. And it's like, why did your parents fail you? Why do I have to deal with you now? Why couldn't they have just made you a normal person like my parents and said, no, if you're stalking somebody on the internet and responding to every single one of their tweets with hatred, you're weird. Don't do that. Go outside. You have to go play sports. That's what my parents would have said. So I think their parents failed them. I don't think it's anything inherent that they were born with. I think it was their upbringing, but everybody can change. Everyone can change, as Rocky said in Rocky IV after he ended the Cold War and tore down the Berlin Wall. It's like $5. Based. Can someone link or name these films? Yeah, I'll say it again. Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul and My Brothers and Sisters in the North. My Brothers and Sisters in the North, Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul, and then the Midwestern Marx DPRK playlist. That's what you got to check out. I think you're really going to have your mind blown. Because I was in the same, I can't judge. I was in the same place as you years ago. I was like, North Korea, there's no way. There's no way. I fought it for so long. And the more I learned about these people, I'm like, man, I really admire them. I really admire their struggle. And I'm really, really, really disgusted by what my government has tried to do to them in my name. And I'm disgusted by the lies that I believed about them. So appreciate it. You bet. You bet. Have fun with that, comrade. Just like all of us were wrong about stuff before, gaining more info and getting corrected. Yeah, exactly. It's a constant process of learning and developing. Are the DPRK communist or not? Or are you waiting to say they failed to say that they aren't? Hey, I don't say any. The USSR failed. They were still socialist. They were still governed by a communist party. They made grave errors, which helped the U.S. undermine them and led to their dissolution. But they were still socialist, and they still did amazing things for their people and for the people of the world. So I'm not one of these communists who says real communism's never been tried, because it's not true. It has been tried, and yes, they've made mistakes. Yes, they've failed, but they've also done amazing things. The USSR, the first years of the USSR in China were the fastest increases in human life expectancy ever achieved in human history. Literacy rates went from like 17% to 100%. People were given universal health care, universal daycare, universal education, things that we don't even have in the wealthiest of capitalist societies. So as Michael Parenti said, to say that communism has failed is to ignore that it's worked for millions of people throughout history. So you're talking to the wrong kind of communist here, my friend, but the DPRK will not fail. The U.S. has tried everything. At this point, it looks like nothing is going to stop the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They've been under sanctions for this long now. They sacrificed 20% of their population to the imperialists. If that can't stop them, what will? But if they fail, if they do collapse tomorrow, they were still socialists. So, have you seen anything from the Catholic workers? What Catholic workers? I've never understood how people blame migrants for the crappy capitalist system we live in. Yeah, it's because, immigrants do, because they're in such a precarious situation, capitalists do benefit from mass immigration because it drives down the average cost of labor, So if immigrants are willing to work for $4 an hour, your boss can hypothetically fire you to hire the immigrant, or say, you have to take less pay Otherwise, I'll just hire a bunch of immigrants. So it does undercut labor markets, which is why capitalists benefit from mass migration, which makes it very easy for right-wingers, especially right-wing populists like Trump, to rail against immigrants, right? Because workers connect it to their job, to how much they're being paid for their labor. And of course, you know, it's the system that creates this. All these immigrants are coming from countries that have been destroyed and destabilized by US imperialism. And that's what we say as communists. And we get to the root of the issue. But if you're a demagogue like Trump, who doesn't want to get to the root of the issue, who just wants to rile people up so they vote for you, you just say immigrants, 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 immigrants. And you have that mesh of racism and bigotry with actually, you know, speaking to real economic concerns that people have. And it's a deadly combo. So, yeah, don't give in to the immigrant fear-mongering. It's not the immigrants' fault. It's the system's fault. Vote for Kim Jong-un. There you go. Write him in. China's popping. How many countries do you think are socialist? The countries who are socialist, Angola you could put on there, but Nicaragua, Venezuela, Bolivia in some ways. You know, there are other Latin American countries who are moving in a socialist direction, Bolivia being probably the main one. I would probably say they are socialists, governed by the MAS party. Nicaragua, Venezuela, Bolivia, and then you have Laos, China, Cuba, Vietnam, and the DPRK, which are the 5 Marxist-Leninist countries. You know, where you have like one party Marxist-Leninist states, explicitly communist countries. Yeah, I'd say all those countries are socialist. And then, you know, Iran almost has like a version of Islamic socialism. Syria under Assad was Ba'athist socialist. And, you know, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. For me, I think those 5 countries are the ones going in the best direction. I would throw Nicaragua in there too. I think they're going in a good direction as well. But I support the socialist countries as well. You know, I support Venezuela's path to socialism. I hope it works. I support Bolivia, you know, moving towards more socialist policies to improve their economy. You know, even if these countries don't have the exact same ideology as me and aren't doing the exact kind of systems that I want to see, I still support them for battling U.S. imperialism and moving towards socialism, moving in a socialist direction. Algeria. I don't know enough about Algeria. Ibrahim Traore is a Marxist. Yeah, that's true. All these African countries are moving in a similar direction. These places where they had coups recently, like Burkina Faso. So, yeah. Venezuela and Cuba are communist countries. The government own all the land. Why everyone leases off the government, moron? Well, that's a good point, Ben. I hadn't considered that. Yeah, so if Venezuela owns all of the land, if the Venezuelan government does, why does France have more government-run industries than Venezuela? Because like 30% of the French economy is in the hands of the government, the state. But only about 17% of the Venezuelan economy is. So how do they own all the land if they only control 17% of it? That's crazy. I don't know how that math adds up, but yeah, I'll have to. I never considered that about Venezuela in Cuba. Like, very good point. Very good. The anti-communists are sending their best as usual. Yeah, and people would be paying much less in rent if all the land was owned by the socialist state. So I wish my house was owned by the state and not a landlord. Sean PXE, thank you. Appreciate you, brother. ACP member with me. We do a lot of work together. I won't give away his location or anything, but thank you so much, PXE. You're the man. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. That's 21 super chats today, y'all. That's like a new record or something. Look at this. 21 of them. Holy cow. We're freaking rich, baby. The American Communist Party will never die. It's the richest party in America. I'm going to be able to buy like 17 laptops to replace my one that got stolen at the airport. Thanks to you, the Midwestern Marx community. and the American Communist Party. Thank you so much. Big things coming. You bet. Let's go. Your math's wrong. You never lived there? My cousin wife from there. Ah, I see. I see. So that economic data is wrong. The World Bank data, the official economic statistics that I just read to you guys was wrong. And the proof of that is Ben's cousin wife come from there. So if Ben's cousin wife say government have all land, that means true. If World Bank economic data say otherwise, World Bank wrong, economists wrong, statisticians wrong, Ben cousin wife right. So there you go. There you have it. Natalie Boles, thank you so much for the 10. Appreciate you, comrade. I don't know if I've seen Natalie in the chat before, so appreciate you for joining the community here. Appreciate you. Ben cousin wife. Yes, yes. Ben cousin wife. Very smart. Ben's cousin's wife is actually Seabass. That's Ben's cousin. Maybe cousin wife is the same person. See, that's what he was saying. I get it now. My cousin wife. I'm sorry, Ben. I was making fun of you. I thought you misspelled it and you were trying to say my cousin's wife. I didn't know you were actually married to your cousin wife. Oh, I see. You're into inbreeding. I mean, that makes sense, honestly, based on the comments you've left here today. So best of luck with that. Much love to your cousin wife. Good luck with the kids that you guys are going to be popping out. I hope they have the correct number of limbs. Thoughts on Sri Lanka's new Marxist president? Oh, yeah, that's another country that you could call socialist. Sri Lanka's always been pretty based. The current government seems pretty awesome. Like they're moving in a good direction. So, yeah, shout out to them. Ben's cousin wife's boyfriend said communism bad. Yes, yes, yes. All right, everybody. This has been a great stream. The Eddie Liger Power Hour has once again gone much longer than an hour. I was just having too much fun talking to you all. Thank you so much for the super chats. If you want to support the Institute financially and not have your money taken away by YouTube, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. Become a monthly supporter, get a copy of Carlos's book, blah, blah, blah. Follow us on everything. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, blah, 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 blah. You know the drill. But mainly, acp.us. Join the party. It's time to fight. It's time to change our country for the better. And I still don't have an outro that doesn't have Danny Shaw in it yet. So no outro today. But we'll hopefully have the outro fixed by next week. And I'll hopefully have a computer by next week. So thank you so much, everyone.